Hey 6th graders, Mrs. Simonson here. Tonight we're doing the second lesson of Unit 7, which has us working with decimals, fractions, and percents. Our two objectives are to be able to find equivalent fractions and also compare and order decimals, fractions, and percents. So let's go ahead and get started. A note about the vocabulary section in your notebook: we taped in this equivalency chart, which I recommend that you frequently look at during this lesson. But the vocabulary section is also a place to write down the steps for converting from one form, say decimals, to another form, let's say percents. Alright, so the first conversion we're going to do is going from decimal to percent. To change a decimal to a percent, you simply need to multiply the decimal by 100. For example, if I have 47 hundredths, I would multiply that by 100. And when we multiply a decimal by 100, that really is the same as moving the decimal point to the right 2 places. So if I'm going to multiply 47 hundredths by 100, I get 47, and that would be the percent. Now I want you to try number 1 and 2 in your notebook, copy both problems down, and convert that decimal to a percent. Press play when you're ready to check your answers. Now let's say I want to go from a decimal to a fraction. The steps are this: write down the digits as a numerator, the decimal place value as the denominator, and reduce if needed. For example, if I have 75 hundredths, the first thing I'm going to do is write down the digits as the numerator. The decimal place value will be my denominator, and in 75 hundredths, the last place value I have is hundredths, so that would be my denominator. And then I would need to check if I can reduce that, and I can. The greatest common factor of 75 and 100 is 25. So if I want to reduce it to lowest terms, I divide by the greatest common factor, and I would get 3/4. Now I want you to try problems number 3 and 4. Convert those decimals to fractions using the steps I just demonstrated. Press play when you're ready to check your work. So we covered what to do when it is a decimal. What if I'm starting with a fraction? How can I change a fraction to a decimal? The easiest step is to divide the numerator by the denominator. This will work for any kind of fraction, but it's important to note that if the denominator is a factor of 10, such as 10, 100, 1,000, those are called powers of 10, it's easier to find an equivalent fraction since those are decimal places. I'll demonstrate, though, the dividing the numerator by a denominator. So if I have the fraction 5/8, remember fractions are really division problems. Your dividend is 5 and your divisor is 8. And because I know it's going to result in a fraction, I can just add a decimal point and a couple of zeros. And now I just go ahead and use DMSB, divide, multiply, subtract, bring down. 0 groups of 8 can go into 5. There are 6 groups of 8 in 50. That results in 48. There are 2 groups of 8 in 20 for 16. And there are 5 groups of 8 in 40. And it terminates, so I have a terminating decimal. And so 5/8 is the same as 625 thousandths. Now I want you to try the next two problems, number 5 and 6, in your notebook. Convert those fractions to decimals by dividing the numerator by the denominator. Press play when you're ready to check your work. To change a fraction to a percent, there are two different routes you can take. You can either first change the fraction to a decimal and then multiply it by 100. So really you're going fraction to decimal, decimal to percent. Or you can set up the fraction as a proportion and use cross products. I'll show you both with 4/5. So if I want to change 4/5 to a decimal, I would divide the 4 by the 5, and I see that that would be 8/10. Now I would multiply it by 100, which remember means moving the decimal 2 places to the right. So I'm going to just add on an extra 0 so that I can move it 2 places. So 4/5 would be 80%. You could also set it up as a proportion though. You could say 4:5 as, see if the pen will catch up here, 4:5 as something, and because percent is based out of 100, the other half of the proportion would be x over 100, and then I can use cross products. 5 times x equals 4 times 100. Let's correct that here. Get rid of that extra one. There we go, 100. And then I divide both sides by 5. So x is equal to 80. So 80 out of 100 or 80%. So you can see both methods get us to the answer. You choose which step you like best when solving problems number 7 and 8 in your notebook. Change those fractions to percents. Press play when you're ready to check your work. If you want to change a percent to a decimal, you're really just doing the opposite of going from a decimal to a percent. To go from a decimal to a percent, we would move the digits, we would multiply by 100, which essentially means moving the decimal point 2 to the right. Well, now we're just going to do the reverse. We're going to move the decimal point 2 places to the left. It's the same as dividing by 100. And we simply remove the percent sign. Let me show you how this works. In 75%, if I remove the percent sign, I have 75 with the decimal sitting right there. I'm going to divide by 100 or move 2 to the left, so 0.75 would be the decimal. In 8.5%, I'm going to write 8.5 instead and take out the decimal point. And in this case, I'm going to put some zeros in front of the 8 since I'm moving to the left. Move 2 places to the left and I get 0.085 or 85 thousandths is the decimal that's equivalent to 8.5%. Now I want you to try problems 9 and 10 in your notebook, change those percents to decimals, and press play when you're ready to check your work. If you want to change a percent to a fraction, you write the percent digits as the numerator of the fraction and always have the denominator be 100, then reduce to lowest terms. For example, 11% would simply be 11 hundredths. 11 hundredths is already in lowest terms, so I don't need to reduce. Now I want you to try problems number 11. Press play when you're ready to check your work. Now that we know how to change from all three of those formats, we can compare and order decimals, fractions, and percent. If they're all in the same format, if they're all percents or they're all decimals or they're all fractions, we've already talked about how to do that. But what if they're in all different forms, such as in this problem? The table shows the populations of the portions of the world population that live in 4 countries, and we need to put them in order of population from least to greatest. Brazil's 3%, China's 1/5, Japan's 1/50th, and the United States is 46 hundredths. First thing I would need to do is change them all to one format. And since 2 of them are already in fraction form, it would be easiest to change the other 2 to fraction form. So 3% going from a percent to a fraction means I just write the percent as the numerator and it's out of 100. So 3 hundredths, China's already at 1/5, Japan's at 1/50th. And the United States is a decimal, and to change a decimal to a fraction, you write the digits as the numerator and the last place value as the denominator, and it's thousands. Now I can go ahead and start comparing. And we've talked about how to compare fractions. You had 5 different methods. The method I'm going to use, I believe, would be, well, they're all less than a half. They don't have a residual. These 2 have the same piece, 1/5, 1/50th. And so it might be easiest to change them all to common denominators. So I'm going to change 3 hundredths to be 30 thousandths. 1/5 would be 200 thousandths. And 1/50th would be 20 thousandths. and then I can go ahead and compare since now I have all of them having a common denominator. So the smallest would be Japan at 1/50th, followed by Brazil at 3%, followed by the United States at 46/100ths, and the largest would be China at 1/5. And notice when I compare them, I put them back into their original format. Now I want you to do problems number 13 and 14 using these steps, and then press play when you're ready to check your work. Tonight we worked with converting between fractions, decimals, and percents, finding equivalencies, comparing and ordering those three different formats. At this time, review any part of the movie before you take your quiz at Schoology, and we'll see you next time.